Hey, big guy, you look like an intelligent person. But are you crapping out at the COVID casino? Are you strolling around the tables looking at all the big winners and looking at yourself and saying, I want to be a player with a room to myself in the high roller suite? Or are you just another loser to a novel coronavirus, forced to wear a mask, unemployed, staying at home with your favorite activities placed on hold indefinitely? Then grab another Corona and listen up. Cervezas for all my amigos, right? Jacta alia est. Have you ever heard that Latin phrase before? Some prefer to say alia jacta est. But whichever form you prefer, when Father Dolan tossed that phrase on us in sixth period after lunch, he simply assumed that we knew that, translated from the Latin, it was simply a way of saying that the die is cast. And that is the dye, not like the stains that you use to color fabrics or any other kind of dye that might go through your head, especially in a pandemic crisis. But even many folks who go all the way to Vegas would probably have no idea what the dealer meant by asking for the die and not the dice. It's the singular form. Dice is plural. And like quoting Shakespeare, using Latin phrases tends to impress at least some people. You find it sometimes with doctors and lawyers especially the ones most vulnerable to the salesman pitch when he will introduce himself with the line to a sucker saying, "You look like an intelligent person," quietly laughing to himself. And back at Jesuit High School, we had a high roller priest named Father Dolan, who, if I had to describe him, looked just like Mike Wallace playing the role of an Irish priest with jet white, slick back hair. He used that very same manipulative psychology method to teach us about an ancient language for which most of us would rather be studying something else more useful and practical. There was no teacher, probably other than the infamous Sister Eucharista, who had a fame that kids knew about long before they ever arrived on the first day of orientation at high school. There were stories about Father Dolan even in public schools, and some of them even claimed that he wore iron chains around his neck, and tales about his meting out corporal punishment against students who transgressed his standards. And as soon as you received your first dot matrix printout of your schedule during orientation and you saw the word Dolan, you began to pray that it was either a mistake that you could quickly correct with the registrar, or even perhaps it might have been the other Dolan who was supposed to be a really nice guy. And proceeding for a year through the declensions and the conjugations, or the nouns and the verbs in an antiquated language that most no longer by even then heard at Mass, Father Dolan would say phrases like "Veni, Vidi, Vici," and assume that we had not only read the words on the old Marlboro cigarette boxes, but actually knew what they meant, who said it, and why. He assumed that we knew about the story of Marathon, that we already knew about Pyrrhic victories in the Peloponnesian War. He assumed that we knew exactly how many parts into which Gaul had been divided. He assumed that we were intimately familiar with the wars of Caesar, the Ides of March, and the burning of the bridge after we had crossed over the Rubicon. Or so we thought, because we were just terrified freshmen, scared, who learned to be terrified of him, just like drill sergeants do in basic training. And we didn't realize that he was just playing a dramatic role to assist in our education, occasioned by sufficient evolutionary pressure, but having increased his chances of winning that toss of dice by exploiting the odds in his favor with what a salesman would describe as a qualified customer. A phrase with which you may be familiar if you had been pre-qualified for a mortgage or car note, and which probably also made you feel a bit more confident while also luring you in to make the sale. And it is that confidence component that makes a good con man a good con man. And if you're ever invited to a poker game and don't know who the sucker is, you know how that goes. Father Dolan knew that every single kid in his class had empirically been pre-qualified to be there, because everyone had to be to successfully negotiate a standardized test, just to be extended an invitation. I don't know if it had gold awning or anything like that, like some invitations people receive, but mine definitely didn't. But it was an extended invitation to that casino for educational excellence. And that was enough for most of us in going into high school. And it was a safe bet that we were probably proud, our mamas and daddies were probably proud, our neighborhoods were probably proud, maybe even our whole parish or church was proud, because their favorite son was going to a fine school, was going to make something of himself. And we had a little evolutionary pressure applied on us to make sure that we did not let those folks in our amen corner down. But the boys who arrived in Father Dolan's class were not just invited to Vegas, but to the high roller suite in Vegas, because they were the best of the best and assessed as being sufficiently capable to skip the course in introductory Latin and proceed to the more difficult instruction in Latin 1, followed by a Roman numeral, and which came with the price that when you passed that challenge in sophomore year, you had to actually go on to complete Latin 2. While the folks in Latin intro could find some other subjects to fill their daily schedules as wiser fools. And playing with the odds on his side, mathematical certainty dictated, and not just blind faith or blind luck, gave Father Dolan a blessed assurance that within 4 years, the students he taught would not just be saying that after high school at a college preparatory education school, they had graduated to go to some college, but it was in his class where the kids were more likely than not going to be receiving the acceptance letters from Georgetown, the Ivy Leagues, the service academies, and even one tiny school in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley named after 2 Virginia gentlemen, one named Washington, and the other gentleman with whom you might have found some acquaintance as General Lee. But on January 10, in the year 49 BC, Julius Caesar took a gamble and decided to return to Rome with his conquering legion, violating the laws of the emperor by bringing his legions into the capital city. Back in a day when the reason why soldiers began the tradition of saluting with their right hand was because the popular belief was that if you wanted to pose a threat to a superior officer, you would have to use your right hand. And the visual signal would let everyone know that you posed no threat, unless you were left-handed, or sinister in Latin, a tradition carried over to seafaring vessels with mighty cannon that would empty their stores of ammunition with a 21-gun salute before coming into port, saying that we are unarmed. But a popular general we today know as Julius Caesar decided to take a gamble to not only bring his armed legions into the capital of Rome, but also to burn the bridge behind him. And as Suetonius recorded in history, having weighted the odds heavily in his favor, the die was cast. Jacta alia est. Now, we've taken a lot of turns around the roulette wheel, and you're probably asking by now what this has to do with COVID-19 and pandemic. And it is a rather circuitous route to a point, to be certain. But like those pre-qualified boys in Father Dolan's Latin 1 class, who more likely than others at a fine Jesuit high school were on their way to some more high roller suites later on in the future because of simple probability of their preparation and validated scores, Julius Caesar was never some long shot nobody with everything against him. He was born from a patrician family. He had a lineage back to Troy, and some say had ancestors descended from the goddess Venus. He was an accomplished historian, author, and soldier who had not even had been captured by pirates when he was young. And even after being captured, demanded a higher ransom from the pirates for his release. Went back to capture the pirates who caused him the inconvenience of having to be captured by pirates. Caesar is like, he's nobody with no history. The senators in Rome had reason to fear Julius long before he burned a bridge and came rolling down towards the Colosseum. But when you look at a pneumonia of unknown etiology, it has a great publicist like Father Dolan had to inspire fear in kids before they got to high school. But when you look at the science or pathology, an epidemiologist and virologist as a scientist don't read the press clippings, but rely on empirically proven metrics they call secondary attack rate, which is calculated preferably in large sample size trace contact studies, the standardized test for a virus to be qualified for the pandemic high roller suite. And the virus is like the Spanish flu, typhoid fever, and the Black Plague that made history, at least had a secondary attack rate among tracer contacts exceeding 20%. The threshold to be extended an invitation to the contagious disease casino, if not in excess of 60% to qualify for the high roller suite as a highly contagious pathogen. But in tracer contact study after tracer contact study, there were two consistent findings about a novel coronavirus that indicate that a novel coronavirus has to be loading its dice. Its validated attack rates are rarely consistent, which simply defies all known science and why we call science science. And its most consistent attack rate falls as validated by the largest sample size tracer contact study to date, over 3 million laboratory confirmed cases, is less than 5%, 4 times too small to even get an offer to be flown out to the casino to play the penny slots. Now grab a lab coat, a thermometer, a stethoscope, and another Corona, because we are only at the beginning of the road to the novel coronavirus jackpot that will have you up in the high roller suite before you can say lucky strikes. Are you ready? Are you set? Let's go. Scientists have what they call a scientific method that has been tested for years and years and years and years and years, hundreds of years. And it is a systematic approach to observing novel phenomena. That's a scientist word for mysterious stuff. And through rigorous examination, collection of evidence, employing time-tested and validated protocols and procedures, they're actually able to figure out a lot of stuff through analysis, kind of like Sherlock Holmes stuff. They can see stuff that others can't because they know how to examine it like a scientist. Remember Galileo, who grabbed a telescope and found rings around Saturn? Even the folks at the Vatican said, there are no rings around Saturn, Galileo. And Galileo said, but you just need to take a look at this telescope. And do you know what they did? They refused and hauled them off to the Inquisition to consider the science of coercive interrogation. And as a scientist, Galileo knew the science of that. I figured he calculated that he'd have no better luck than picking a fight with a security guard who got angry about a gambler breaking too many casinos. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for governor of Virginia. I ask every Christian, every conservative, every Republican, every Democrat, every liberal, every conservative, and every Virginian and American true to like the motto of the infantry. Follow me and we shall overcome. Honest. And y'all come back now. Yeah.
Oh, you're a mountain from which there flows a fountain. So let its water wash my sins away. A seeker and you are a keeper, you are a teacher, won't you teach me the way? Reach out and lead me, guide me and keep me in the shelter of your care each day. 'Cause I am a seeker.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
You are a leader, won't you show me the way? You show